Turn on the recording. So again, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Sumo Logic's Sumo Metric Analyst course, where you get to learn about metrics and how to create metric queries and that sort of thing. For those of you with us yesterday, you recall that we played with log queries. And so we'll talk about writing metric queries this time. That's what this class is all about, okay? Sorry. Forgive me there. Anyway, I'm still John Meredith. I taught you all yesterday. Been Sumo a little over 2 years. I have worked also professionally as a programmer, a DBA, a network admin, and IT manager, and all that fun stuff. So, and I've been teaching for quite some time. So I always enjoy teaching. I'm assisted by Odell. So Odell, you want to say hi, sir?
Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome everyone. We are so glad that you decided to continue building on your knowledge. So let's make it fun and mental.
Very good, very good. All right, so our game plan, again, we're going to talk a little bit about we're going through the agenda here. We're going to review some basic terms with regards to metrics and key performance indicators and stuff like that. And then, of course, just like yesterday, we're going to go jumping right into the labs. We're going to focus on collecting some metrics, analyzing those metrics, and writing queries against those metrics. Then we're going to talk about some various use cases, monitoring metrics, and basically just talking about metrics, converting logs to metrics, all kinds of stuff. Then we'll wrap it up. And you get a chance to take a certification exam. So, and again, we do encourage you to take the certification exam. And if you do at the end of this class, keep in mind that Odell and I will be here to answer questions, or at least I will. Odell's got to step away for something else. If you pass the exam and that sort of thing, you get to fill out this lovely Uber Eats form. Or for those of you who happen to be in India, we also have Swiggy on this form. So you can get a voucher for lunch or whatever for $15 US. Okay. So that's that little game plan. One thing I want to mention about this exam, of all of our certification exams, this one's probably the hardest. So I want to disclose that to you up front. It's not hard because it's really hard because it requires you to look at the documentation and looking for specific things out of the documentation. So I will try to point some of that out as we go through this. To make it easy for you, to try to help you out. But again, if you get stuck on a question, feel free to ask, and we'll do everything we can to try to help you out. Okay. So I'm going to stop my video streaming here just to save a little bandwidth, and let's get this party started. So here we go. What is a metric? A metric is a data point in time that measures the value of something. So CPU utilization, disk drive activity, network traffic. I want to see the number of customers I've had on my website, some quantitative value that we can look at. Everyday metrics, right? Maybe you take, measure your temperature, your weight, your height of your child every 6 months, whatever. Something that you typically, it's a numeric value and it represents something typically over time. Now, sometimes within companies, they refer to these metrics as key performance indicators, KPIs. And so we can use metrics to, again, track key performance indicators to see how we're doing. How over time are our systems running? Whether you're on AWS, Google platform, whatever, even on your own prem equipment. When I first installed my servers, that server had all kinds of capabilities and stuff like that. And maybe the CPU utilization was maybe 20%. Well, as I added more software to it and did more things to it, that eventually got up to where eventually I had to replace the box. I had to replace the system. Now, in a cloud environment, it's a little easy because it automatically upgrades things for you. But the point is knowing how your CPU utilization is doing, your network performance, those various metrics will tell you how your system is capable of doing. Also, if you have an outage that occurs, you can use metrics to understand what the outage is that occurred, and then you'll use logs to understand why it occurred. So again, metrics are very, very important in our society today. When we look at metrics versus logs, some people get confused with, is this a log or is this a metric? Again, metrics are typically numeric and they're typically measured over time. So if I were to say I want to look at wind patterns over the last 24 hours, that's certainly over time. But wind patterns could be from the south, southeast, north, northeast, that sort of thing. They're not numeric. Now, if I want to capture wind speed over the last 24 hours, or I want a count of wind patterns over the last 24 hours, that would be a metric. Every time the wind exceeded 20 knots, that's simple Boolean, right? It's either did or did. Now, if I do a count of that, again, that could be a metric. But every time the wind exceeded 20 knots, that's going to be a log entry. I want to see my CPU uptime for the last 15 minutes. Again, that's numeric. How long have I been up for the last 15 minutes? Although I have to say, if I'm looking at CPU uptime for the last 15 minutes, I hope it's been 15 minutes. Okay. If it hasn't, something's seriously wrong. A failed login. A failed login is, again, a log entry, right? So-and-so failed to log in. Now, a count of those logins or how long it took them to log in, those might be metrics. And then the number of server errors on an hourly basis. That's a good example of a metric. And these metrics, of course, we can chart, and we can visualize, and we can do all kinds of neat things. Okay. As you all know from previous classes, I hope you all know, that in order to be able to write metric queries and things like that, there's a 3-step process that we go through. The first is data collection. We have to get your metrics into Sumo Logic. So that starts with collectors and that starts with sources. Now, you may recall us in the past telling you that we teach collectors and sources in the admin class, and that is absolutely true. But we also teach it here. So we'll teach you a little bit about collectors and sources in this class, and we'll actually set up a collector and source if you want to. When I say if you want to, some of you may not be able to install an installed collector on your computer. Maybe your machines are locked down. Maybe some of you don't want to, and I understand that, but I will install it on my computer and you'll be able to see my metrics and use my metrics. So we will go through this data collection process. Then we'll do a search and analyze. We'll write metric queries this time, not log queries, but metric queries. The operators, we typically have the same operators, and they mean the same thing, but they function a little differently. And we'll build charts and visualizations and things like that. And then, of course, we can then take those charts and visualizations, and we can build dashboards, and we can actually do some monitoring of our metrics and see how that works. So then we'll talk about all 3 of these phases over the next 1 hour and 15-minute lecture. As far as collecting metrics, again, we've got 2 types of collectors. There's a hosted collector. So if you're on the cloud, whether you're on AWS or Azure or whatever, that's a hosted collector. You don't have to do anything about it. Then we also have installed collectors. So if you've got your own on-prem server stuff, you can install a collector. Now, that collector is a lightweight Java-based application, and you can actually install a collector on each one of these machines if you want, because these machines have logs or metrics that you want to extract and you want to bring into Sumo. Or you can install a consolidated installed collector, a centralized log collector, and then these machines would forward their logs to this machine. And again, the collector's job is to compress, encrypt, and send the data to Sumo Logic. So your collectors could be in each of your prem machines, or you could consolidate that. As far as trade-offs and performance values and thresholds and all that stuff, that we do get into the admin class. So I don't want to get into that right now. This slide is very busy, but if you look where the Sumo Logic Cloud is and you draw this line down where you see the different shades, to the right, you've got your hosted collectors, AWS, Azure, some things like software as a service like Salesforce, Office 365, Okta, all of those wonderful, wonderful products. Again, these hosted collectors are hosted by us. You don't have to worry about them. They're there. If you use Okta, if you use Salesforce, you can grab your information, logs, and metrics from those. Over here on the left is where our installed collectors are. And as I mentioned before, I could install a collector on each machine, or I could have an consolidated installed collector and have these machines forward their logs to this machine, which will encrypt it, compress it, and send it through your firewall to the Sumo Logic Cloud. So, this makes a great test question. And again, as you all probably know, in a little while, I'll show you where you can access our slides. But number one, we don't ingest metrics more than a week old. So when we look at the timestamp, if it's more than a week old, we're going to reject it. Now, once you start ingesting metrics, it should be very current and it should be very fresh. So unless you go out to someplace where you've stored a bunch of metric values, you shouldn't have this problem. So, but we do not ingest metric data that is more than a week old, period. Now, as far as metric retention goes, as we bring in these metrics, we bring them in the raw, and we retain them in the raw for 7 days. As we bring them into the raw, we are going to do roll-ups. We're going to do a min, a max, an average, a sum, and a count at 1 minute intervals. And we're going to take that 1 minute interval and we're going to save it for 30 days. We also do a 1 hour roll-up, a 1 hour interval roll-up, where we do a min, a max, an average, a sum, and a count, and we retain that for 13 months. So the moral to the story is, if you want to look at your metrics over the last year, you can look at them within an hour interval. If you want to look over the last 30 days, you can look at within a minute interval. And then if you want to look at your raw data, maybe it comes in every 10 seconds, you can see it over a period of 7 days. But this is our metric retention policy. Yeah. And again, it makes some great test questions. Okay. We typically, when we deal with metrics, we use something called key value pair formats. Those of you familiar, most technologies use a lot of key value pairs. So here is my key metric. What metric am I looking at? Wind speed. What region? Oh, sorry. What region am I looking at? EU. What country am I looking at? Spain. So again, key, value, value, value. So when we create metrics, we can use these key values to specify what we're looking for. Now, again, if I've got data coming in my wind speed in my European Union, in Spain, I will say arbitrarily, we have 255 stations. So when we look at the metric for wind speed, we'll see all 255 stations here. See lots of data. Now, if we want to filter for only the city in Valencia of Spain, we could say city equals Valencia, add that to our query. And now we're only going to see 3 of the 255, the ones in Valencia. And if I want to see one value, I can use some sort of an operator like an average or a sum or whatever to see the average of those 3 stations. And so you'll find that, and again, when we build our queries, we're going to use these key value pairs. That's how we're going to write our queries. Now, in our metrics here, we've got a bunch of different operators. These operators are different than the log operators. I mean, some of them look the same, like we got a top K and we got a time shift, and they all behave the same, except there's a couple of nuances. So let me stop my slides for just a second. And let me go into our documentation, right? It'll help.sumologic.com. Help.sumologic.com. In our various chapters, we have a chapter here on metrics. And so if I go into the chapter on metrics, again, my table of contents moves out here. This is everything you need to know about metrics, but we're afraid to ask. In fact, if I click on getting started with metrics, here's a video for you. Again, how to set your collectors and all that fun stuff. Stuff here about Amazon Cloud Source, all kinds of stuff. So depending on what your sources and stuff are, I'm going to provide you lots and lots of information. Now, back to my slides. My slides gave me a link to see my metric operators. But you know what? I'm going to go out here. And again, in the top of my help, I'm just going to search for metric operators. And it will then take me to my metric operators. Here we go, metric operators. I can click on this link for metric operators. And by the way, I'll copy this and put this in the chat box in case you all want it. There it is. So here's a listing of all the operators we use for our metric queries. Very handy to have. And again, just like with our log queries, we have a cheat sheet that you can print and put out and all that fun stuff here and put next to your computer about the various functions that we use for metric operators. So to make it easy for you. So these are the operators we're going to talk about today, some of these operators, and basically play around. Okay. Back to the slides. Again, if you have any questions as we're going through this, please feel free to ask. Okay. Just let us know. All right. It's time for us to log in. Now, one thing, I want you to pay very close attention here. You're going to log in with different credentials this time. You've been logging in as Training Plus Analyst the last 2 days. Today, you're going to log in as Training Plus Admin. So it's going to give you a higher permissions, higher level of rights, so we can set up a collector if we want to. So once again, I want you to fire up Google Chrome or Firefox, and I want you to go to service.sumologic.com. That's service.sumologic.com. That's our training environment, right? Then I want you to pick a 3-digit number. You can use the same 3-digit number you used yesterday or the day before. That's fine. So you're going to sit there and pick a 3-digit number. And if you would, put it in the chat box, just to make sure we don't make duplicates. Great. Terrific. Thank you all. Okay. Now, when you log in, instead of Training Plus Analyst with that 3-digit number at sumologic.com, you're going to log in as Training Plus Admin with that 3-digit number at sumologic.com. Training Plus Admin with that 3-digit number. Replace these hashtags with that 3-digit number at sumologic.com. And then the password is security22. So just to demonstrate here, service.sumologic.com, and I'll immediately logs me in. I'm going to log myself out. And I want to change this to Training Plus Admin with whatever 3-digit number I want. I'll grab 603. 603 is the area code here in New Hampshire. And then the password is, let me show it to you here. The password is security 22 exclamation mark. Now this password also changes once a month. And so when we change it in April, we don't post this password because we try to control and restrict who can access our admin accounts as they need to. So the point is, if you need to next month access and log in as an administrator, send me an email. So again, send me an email asking that information, and I will let you know what that password is. I don't know what it is right now. I won't know until we change it. But the first Monday of the month, we will change the password. So that's how you can find out what the password is. So you should be able to log in here. And what I'd like you all to do is I'd like you all to log in. And when you all get logged in, I'd like you to raise your hands. So please go ahead and log in. And once you get logged in, raise your hands. Now, if you're having problems, let us know. Let me or Adele know, and we'll gladly try to help you out. Again, remember, you're logging in as a training admin account this time, not the training analyst account. So again, in case anybody who joined us a little late needs that information, let me copy it again. Let me paste it down. So you're going to use Training Plus Admin with that 3-digit number. Okay. So 30 of you have logged in. Way to go. 30 out of 42. Well done. Okay, good. So anybody having problems logging in? Anybody having issues here? Okay. Thank you, Pooja. Okay. All right. So I'm going to assume there's no problems. I'm going to go ahead and lower the hands. Again, if you're having a problem, please let us know. Either in the chat or unmute your mic and let us know you're having problems. So just for fun, again, I'm going to log out as this training admin account, and I'm going to log in with my account because I have full administrative rights. You've got some restricted administrative rights. And as you all know from previous classes, those of you with us in the previous class, right? You know that you can get copies of our slides and a recording of this class and all that sort of thing by clicking on the house icon, clicking on certification, clicking on get certified. And here under this recorded live training, and again, you won't see all the boxes that I have because you're logging in as a training account, but you will see this recorded live training box. And here under the recorded live training box, if I scroll down, oh heck, we haven't added the metric course here. I thought they did. So I'll get that, we'll get that fixed, but not before class ends. If you need slides or information from slides, we'll provide them for you. So just bear with me and we'll get that taken care of. But this is one way of, this is normally the one way you get access to those slides. Another thing here, actually, let me just leave that alone for right now. As far as our labs go, back here to Sumo Logic, again, if I go into my documentation, and I can go to my documentation by opening up a new tab, typing in help.sumologic.com, or I can open up my navigation panel here in Sumo Logic. I can click on help and I can click on documentation. As many of you know, our labs are in this first chapter. Start here, quick start labs and tutorials. And here it says hands-on labs metric mastery. These are the labs that you and I are going to do. So let me take this link, let me copy it, let me paste it, and get you guys going. Okay. So there's the link to those labs. Now the introduction just says, how do I get an account? How do I log in? You've done that. We're good to go. So in lab 1 and lab 2, we are going to sit and install a collector on your computer, on my computer, and we can also define a host metric source. Now, as I mentioned, some of you may have difficulty doing lab 1 and 2. Your company may have restricted what you can install on your computer, or quite frankly, you don't want to send your metric information or anything from your computer to Sumo Logic. I understand. You do not have to do labs 1 and 2. Okay, you don't. But I'm going to walk through labs 1 and 2, and I'm going to show you how this works. So here in lab 1, installing a collector. First thing we have to do is we have to download the collector. We have to install the collector. So by the way, I recommend if you're running Google Chrome to take this tab, right click on it and pin it. So it's kind of out of the way and you can switch back and forth easily. Also, I would recommend you pin your Sumo Logic tab so you can switch back and forth easily enough. Now in lab 1, what it wants us to do is it wants us to go into Sumo. It wants us to go into our managed data. It wants us to go into collection. And here it wants us to click on add collector. And when we add collector, there's two types, hosted collector and installed collector. We want to use the installed collector. So I can click on add installed collector. And here I can see all kinds of different flavors of installed collector. If you're running Linux, there you go. If you're running Windows, whatever operating system you have, hopefully you got a 64-bit operating system by now. And if you're on a Mac OS, then you can obviously install the collector there. If you're running Unix, then you can grab a binary package. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab this Mac OS Intel, and because that's what I'm running Mac, and I'm going to go ahead and download that file. So here in step 1, lab 1, step 1, they want us to go in here, grab the installed collector, grab the one for your computer, and then we're going to install this. So that's basically that. Okay. Leslie points out when I click on new, I don't seem to have an option, I don't have a new option to collector. What you want to do, Leslie, is you want to log out and you want to make sure you're logged in as an admin account. So you want to make sure you're logged in as training plus admin with this 3-digit number, not training plus analyst like you were yesterday. I'm going to put that information back in the chat box. Then you should see that. You are logged in as an admin. Okay. So let's try this again. Thank you. You are going to go into your Sumo Logic environment, or the training Sumo Logic environment, right? You're going to go in here to the navigation panel, go into manage data, go into collection, and you're saying you don't have this add collector option, or should be able to click on this add collector option. Okay. Are you logged into your company's environment at the same time? Okay, good. Okay, fair enough. You should be able to do it. I'll tell you what, let me wrestle with that. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, you thought it was an option under the new button. I see. I apologize. No, it's not under this new button at all. We're not going to use this new button right now at all. It's under here. So thanks. Appreciate the question and the clarification. Okay. So again, you're going to go in here to add collector. You're going to click on installed collector, and you're going to grab the collector type for your operating system. Okay. And I've already downloaded the one for the Mac. So now that we've got it downloaded, we're going to install it. So again, here in lab 1, where it talks about installing the collector, I am going to go down here. I'm going to open up this wonderful DMG file since I'm on a Mac. I'm going to double click this. And it says, hey, it was downloaded from the internet. Are you sure you want to open it? Typical operating system security. Yes, I do want to open it. Thank you very much. And it's going to, in fact, start the installation process. Now, again, if you can't install software on your computer because your machine's locked down, or if you don't want to, that's fine. You'll still be able to do the other labs. Just watch and have yourself a great time. So when I double clicked on this to start it up, one of the things it's going to do is it's going to say, look, I need to install something on your computer. Would you please give me permissions to do so? So again, on my Mac computer, on your Windows computer, it's going to ask you to put your password in. And just so you know, we take passwords very seriously at Sumo Logic. So as you can see, I've got a lot of characters there in my password. And this then starts our setup wizard. So we're going to actually rerun the collector setup wizard. So I'm going to click next. I'm going to accept the agreement. Next. It's going to prepare to install. It's going to uninstall the previous version that was on here. I already had a collector installed on here. It's going to remove that, and it's going to install this newer version on there. We typically update our collectors probably about once a month. And yes, we've, don't have any problems with Log4j and all that stuff. That's all been eradicated. So it says, please connect next to the next Sumo service. Actually, let me click next. This does not surprise me. Occasionally, I get an error when I try to reinstall my collector. It happens once and then it goes away. Something on my machine. So let me go through this again. Bear with me. And again, if you're following along, I don't want you to go any farther than where it asks for an access key or token ID. And I'll get to that in just a minute. Just bear with me. Let me get caught up. There's my password. Again, it's going to accept the license agreement. Click next. It's going to uninstall my previous version, and it's going to install this new version. And this time it should not throw an error. There it goes, installing the software. Okay, good. Just so you know, I'm here at the advanced settings, and you don't have to change in these advanced settings, but if I were to go into advanced settings, just to show you, the collector name, it names the collector based on your host name. So this is my host name, and that's what it's going to use. I can also set in some other settings here if I want to. I can throttle how much CPU percentage it can use. It doesn't take up much, a couple of percent. And then here's the URL where it's going to send it to. If I've got a proxy that I'm going to go through, here's my proxy settings. I can also automatically have it create my sources, but I'm going to manually add the sources, and the two will together. And then the other thing is, who's this going to run as? Is this going to run as root since I'm on a Mac? Or is it going to run as administrator if I'm on a Windows machine? Or do I want it to run under my credentials? So you decide what credentials you want it to run as. Now, again, I don't need to change any of those. I'm going to go with the standard defaults. Then when I click next here, this is hopefully where you are. It's asking for a token or an access key. Okay. Now, what's going to happen here is we want to encrypt data that we send to Sumo Logic. We can either use a token, which is a one-time type code that we put in there, or we can use an access key. And an access key can be used multiple times. Where do we get the token and the access key? We go back to our Sumo Logic environment. So here in our Sumo Logic environment, where I'm adding my collector, you'll see I've got access keys, I've got tokens. We want to use access keys here. Again, tokens are one-time use. You do it and it's done. Access keys you can use as many times as you want to, like AWS access keys. So I click on access keys, and here is where I can add an access key. It says my access keys. There's an add button over here, and I currently have one. So I'm going to click add, and I want you to click add. And you can give this thing a name. Call it access key. I don't care, whatever you want. This allow list, I don't have to worry about. It's if I'm somewhere behind a firewall and I've got problems, I need to add this domain to my allow list, I can, but again, you shouldn't have to worry about that. I'm going to click create key. Now, this is where it gives me my access ID and my access key. This is the only time I will see my access key. So if you've got a company policy that says if you create access keys, you need to copy and store them someplace, now is the time to copy and store them someplace. I don't have such a policy. I'm not going to worry about it. Here in my access ID, you'll see there's a nice little copy button. I'm going to click on that copy button. I'm going to go back over to my installation. I'm going to click on access key. I'm going to click next, and I'm going to paste in my access ID. We go back over here to my access key. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to paste it in to my installation. And then I can click next. And what it's doing, it's trying to connect to our Sumo Logic environment. While that's going on, I'm going to click done here for a second. And here's my new access key. Just to prove a point, when I go into the edit button, I still do not see that access key value anywhere. So the only time you'll ever see it is when you first create it. Okay. I haven't seen it hang up like this. So there we go. Okay, good. So hopefully when you click next, it says we've completed the collector setup wizard. And so now I can click finish. And I now have a collector. Let me go back to my directions for a second. So we've installed this collector. We have, again, added our access key. We created an access key and we added that access key. And now we should be able to go into our collectors and see our collectors. So if I go back to collection, and if I do a search for my host name, there is my collector. My collector has been installed. Life is good. Any questions or problems? So we've set up a collector to encrypt, compress, and send data to Sumo. Now we need to set up some sources of what we want to basically bring into Sumo. And in our case, since this is a metric class, we're going to move on to lab 2, where we're going to create a host metric source. We're going to bring in our metrics is what we're going to do. Okay. So any questions about lab 1 before I move on to lab 2? All right. So here in lab 2, what they want us to do, here's our collector. And you'll notice over here on the far right, there's an add button. And I can click on the add button and click add source. Hold on a second. Okay. Geetha asked, was access key in advance? I have copied. We went in and created an access key. So hopefully you did that. So Geetha, are you all in good shape here? Or do I need to repeat something?
So yeah, I want to know how to add. So I copied the key,
Yep.
but during the installation, where do I find?
Okay. Where do you find that key? Good. Okay.
Yes.
So again, if I go into collectors and if I go in here to access keys, here's where I can see my access keys.
Right. How?
But the problem is when I open it up, I don't see the access key, that long code. Here's the access ID, but I don't see the little access key. The only time you see it is when you initially create it.
Okay. So during the installation, where do I put those keys?
Sorry. Okay. When you were installing the collector, when you
Uh-huh.
ran through this installation, there was a place
Right.
to put that information. You copied and pasted it into that collector.
No, I could not see where it is. So is it in the advanced?
It's not in advance. No, click next.
Oh, got it. Okay.
And then there you'll see you
Got
want
it,
to
got
use
it.
access key, and that's where you're going to copy and paste them to.
Got it. Thank you.
No, thank you. Appreciate it. Guys, I do this all the time. So for me, it's almost second nature. For many of you, this is the first time you've seen it. So I may be going way too fast. So I appreciate you slowing me down or asking questions or looking for clarification.
Yes, this is William. In order to get the access key, you could just tell me, is it complicated? Because I am behind.
Okay. It is not complicated in the fact that you're going to go into your collector. You're going to click on access keys here, and then you're going to click on this add button.
Okay. All right.
And that's going to generate, you give it a name. I'm just going to type something in here to get past this. And it gives you there's your access ID and there's your access key.
Okay, I think I got it from there. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, it's not hard. And of course you can also follow the directions, but I realize most of us men won't follow the directions.
You're right. Sorry.
No worries. All right. So hopefully we've got this little rascal installed and we're ready to move on to lab 2. Okay. Lokesh, you might have an error, getting an error. It's taking longer than expected to register your collector. Not sure what the problem is. I would tell you that we probably want to probably uninstall your collector, and I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. But you're probably going to be stuck here not installing the collector. I'm sorry. There's some issue between you and us, wherever you are in our Sumo Logic environment. All right. Any other problems or questions?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So while doing the advanced setting, the time zone shows default UTC. Should I change the time zone or
Nope,
just
don't change any of those settings.
Okay,
And
thank
in a
you.
minute, I'll explain to you why.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? All right. So now what we want to do is go back to our collection. We want to find your collector. So whatever that collector's name, we like mine was my host name, J Meredith-Mac. You want to find your collector. And here's your collector. And you can see this triangle here. I can collapse it. I can click on it. There's nothing underneath my collector. There's no sources. So we're going to do lab 2 and we're going to add a source. And click add and click add source. Now, these are some of the sources we can install to an installed collector. Local files, remote files, syslogs, scripts, streaming metrics, host metrics. We want to grab host metrics. So if you would, please click on host metrics. And then we get to give this thing a name. Okay. I really do not worry too much about what you want to call it. They want us to call this host metrics _ your initials. So fine. Well, play nice. Host metrics _ your initials. All right. I can also, if I want to, put in the description, don't have to, but I can. I can also define the host name if I want to. I don't need to define the host name, but you can if you want to for the metadata tags. Under source category, we recommend as a best practice that you put in your source category. And here for our source category, they want us to use host metrics / your initials. Host metrics / your initials. Okay. Undo. Can I add my own access ID and access key? You want to use an access ID and access key from the account that you're logged in. So yes, you can add that. In fact, you should have added that by now. So I hope that answers your question. Okay. So again, we're going to call this host metrics because we're going to put all our host metrics grouped together and call them host metrics. And then we want to put in our initials. Okay. Now you can call this whatever you want, but this is a source category that I can use to search this by. Now, here in my scanned interval, how often do I want it to grab my metrics? Every 1 minute, every 5 minutes? I'm going to make it 10 seconds on my computer. You don't have to. You can go with a standard default here, but I want to grab some data here fairly quickly. I'm going to change it to 10 seconds. You don't have to if you don't want to, but I'm going to. And then under here, what metrics do I want? So under CPU, I can grab my CPU user time, my CPU system time, all of these various CPU values. In fact, what I want to do is I want to check everything. I'm going to bring everything in to Sumo Logic so I can see all of these lovely metrics. So these are the metrics it's going to grab from my computer and bring that data in. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. And then down here, there's a section called processing rules for metrics. You don't need to worry about this, but if we needed to, we could write a rule to mask out certain things. So let's say that we're not talking about bringing in metrics, we're talking about bringing in logs. And let's say those logs have credit card information. We could write a processing rule that masks out the credit card number or masks out the employee ID or the social security number or whatever. We can write, that's what that's for. We don't need to use it in this case. Now I'm going to click save. And when I click save, it now adds this host metric here. So now I've got my collector and I've got my source. Now earlier, somebody asked about, should I worry about setting up the time frame and all that stuff in my collector? And I said, no. Here's why. I'm going to do something. I don't want you guys to do it. I just want you to watch. If I go in here and add another source, most of the sources that I add here, other than metrics, I can specify in them how I want to deal with time. Do I want to extract the timestamp from the logs, or do I want to, and what time zone do I want to use, and all that sort of thing. So most of these sources, when you define the sources, that's typically where you set the time zones, how you're going to grab the time. So we don't typically do it in the collector, we do it in the sources. So that's just an FYI for you all. Okay. So again, here in lab 2, we have added a new host metric source. We've filled in the blanks. We've check marked everything. And now we have our source. Now we want to make sure this is working. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and back into our Sumo Logic environment. We're going to go back into our collectors. Back in here, we're going to look for our collector. And then where it says host metric and your initials, you'll see it says host metrics with your initials here under source category. There's a little blue button, If you click on that little blue button, it opens up a metric query. And in this metric query, I can start seeing now my data. I can start seeing my data coming in. So this is the interface that you and I are going to use to create and query our metric data. Okay. If I go into my preview table, actually, let me walk you through this. So here is where I can specify my key value pairs. And I can add another query here if I want to, and I can do some other things, which we'll talk about. This is going to execute my query. Below here, by default, it puts it as a nice chart, nice line chart. But I can actually look at my numbers by clicking preview table. So here's all the metrics that we're bringing in from all the different components that make up my computer. There's 3 pages of them down here. Okay. And I can click on chart to see it as a line chart, or maybe I want to see it as a honeycomb chart, all the different services and metrics I'm bringing in here. Maybe I want to conditionally format them so that certain values will indicate red, yellow, or green, yellow, or red. I can make this a pie chart if I want to, or the donut chart, or whatever kind of chart here that I want, bubble charts, whatever. Bubble charts aren't a good example. But I'm going to go back here to my time series. Now, I don't know, have any of you have used our metrics before, but about a year and a half ago, our metric interface was very clunky. It was very complicated. It was very hard to use. So our developers went back to work, and they went back here to create and make it easy for you and I to use metrics. So they decided, look, let's make it simple. Let's use key value pairs. And let's just make it easy for people to use and make it very visual and make it very visually friendly. And that was our goal. Now, are there any questions about this so far before we get into and actually start writing some queries? Start playing with that. Any questions? Okay. I'm going to close this tab up. In fact, actually, I'm going to close up all my tabs. And if you didn't get a chance to install the collector, you can still use my metric. You can still follow along and follow along with me using my metrics to see what's going on. So again, we want to create a metric query. Lab 3 is all about let's start writing some metric queries. So this time I'm going to click new. This time I'm going to choose metrics. New metrics. And when you go to new metrics, it's going to launch your metric explorer where you can save your query and all that good stuff. But you should hopefully see where it says metric, and then there's a line, filter, there's a line, add operator, there's a line. This is what we call basic mode. If you don't see this, if it says enter an expression, that means you're in advanced mode. And if you're in advanced mode, I'd like you to get back to basic mode. So I'm in the right mode, but I'm going to change it to the other mode by clicking on these 3 vertical dots, clicking on advanced mode. For those of you who see this, the advanced mode, I want you to click on the 3 vertical dots and switch back to basic. Now, I'm going to cover both modes, but as I mentioned before, people told us that our metric query engine was far too complicated. So that's why we redesigned it this way. So here, you and I can pick a metric, whatever metric that I want. And I can scroll down and look, or I can start typing. So for example, if I start typing in CPU, I see that I've got, CPU idle, CPU, IRQs, CPU load average. I want you to select CPU load average 15 minutes. So select CPU load average 15 minutes. And then as far as filters, we're not going to run any filters. We're going to let that go for right now. And we're going to go over here and we're going to click on this run button. And it's going to show us all of our data for the last 15 minutes. And just like with our logs, we can change our time frame. We can specify a date range, all of that good stuff. Okay. So, but we're going to go with 15 minutes. 15 minutes is fine. Here in my preview table, it's showing me all of the different metrics that I am looking at. Now, this is not only my computer, this is any computer we've got going into Sumo Logic that I have rights to. So I'm looking at my EC2 prod account, my EC2 stage account, all kinds of fun stuff in here. Yeah. I can click on chart, and when I click on chart, oh my gosh, it looks like a big old spaghetti factory. I am looking at all of these different metrics going on here as a line chart. And again, as I said before, I could change it to something else, but I kind of like the line chart. So I'll go back to that time series line chart. And so I'm looking at a whole bunch of metrics here. Is everybody good so far? Any problems, any questions, any issues? Now, what I want to do is find that needle in a haystack. I don't want to look at all of my CPU load averages. I want to look for my host in here. So I can go in here to filters and I can say I want to filter by source category equals. And when I do that, you see I've got a pick list here of different host metrics. And so for those of you who didn't install the collector or the source, you can use mine, host metrics JWM. If you see yours on here, go ahead and select yours. So I'm going to sit there and filter for that metric. And now when I run it, here I am seeing this specific metric, load average 15 minutes for my computer. So this is how you and I can select specific metrics for specific systems, so forth and so on. And so here in lab number 3, we created a new metric query. We grabbed our CPU load average 15 minutes. We saw all of the hosts, the spaghetti factory, if you will. Then we went over here to the filters and we specified a specific host. And so now we have this right here. Now, what we want to do is compare my CPU load average to other CPU load averages. So what I want to do is I want to add a second query here. This is my first query. It's a query. Over here, there's a plus sign where I can add a second query. So let me go ahead and click on that. This time I want to use the same metric. So I click on metric. Again, I'm going to use CPU load average 15 minutes. And rather than, if I don't specify an operator or a filter, as you can imagine, I'm going to see the old spaghetti factory come back. Okay. So what I want to do here is, instead of using a filter and filtering for a specific system, I can use an operator. And what I want to do is I want to see the average of all those CPU load averages. So if I click on operator and click on average, it's now going to use an average, and I can average it out by different things, but I'm just going to go with the overall average. And I'm going to run this. So now what I'm seeing down here at the bottom is my CPU load average for my computer. And then I'm also seeing the overall average of all the other systems. So that's the overall average for all the other systems for their CPU load average. Now, I hope that you think, gee, this is pretty simple. I click and pick and choose what I want, and life is good. And I think it's pretty simple. By the way, just like with visualizations in our log search, these also act as selectors. If you want to mask something out, you don't want to make it available, up here where your A and B queries are, you can click on them to hide a specific query, but you can't hide them both, okay? So I can hide a specific query. It removes the functionality out of my visualization. If I want to add this to a dashboard, there's a little button right there to add to my dashboard. Pure and simple. And the dashboards are the same. So again, what we've done here in lab 2, as I said, we grabbed our CPU load average, then we clicked on the plus sign, and we did a CPU load average 15 minutes, an average, and we got something that looked vaguely like this. Mine doesn't go across all the way because it hasn't loaded the data. You know, I only started the collector, excuse me. I only started my collector just a few short minutes ago. So this line hasn't gone all the way across yet. And that is your first query in basic mode. Well done, folks. Are there any questions? Any questions at all? Then let's move on to lab number 4. You know, the best query in the world to create is the one you don't have to create. We have in Sumo Logic, as most of you are aware, something called the app catalog. So if I need to, I can go in here and I can add my app catalog, go to my app catalog on my main menu. And here, if I search for the word host, you'll see that I've got an application that has host metrics. And if I click on that application, I can preview my dashboards, and it proceeds to tell me CPU information, disk information, memory information. These are queries and dashboards already built to provide me information and insight about what's going on, okay? And so here in lab number 4, what we're going to do is we're going to install this. And what we're going to do is, again, we're going to go to our app catalog, if we're not already there. And I want you to search for host, find this host metric application. And I want you to click add to library. And this is going to be called host metrics. I would like you to add your initials to this host metrics. And I'm going to add today's date, because I do this quite a bit, and this way I can clean it up. Now, as far as my source category goes, I'm going to specify that my source category is equal to my host metrics slash, and then I can specify my initials. So per the directions, sorry, folks, per the directions, they want us to grab host metrics and then again, your initials, so that you're looking at your host metrics. To tell you the truth, I'm going to modify this for myself a little bit. I'm going to put a star in here. Now I can see not only my host metrics, but anybody else that source category starts with host metrics. If I click on advanced, you'll see it's going to save it in my personal directory. And I'm going to click add to library. And now it's going to add this to my personal folder, my personal library. So let me go in here. And let me just go ahead and do a search for host. Okay, host metrics, there it is, 0324, the one I just installed. Now I can, you can, we can look at these dashboards, and I'll start with the host metric overview. So here on my host metric overview, I am seeing several different, my 15-minute, my 5-minute, my 1-minute. I can see how my CPU and stuff is doing. I can see my computer as well as other people's computers, SH computer, JHD. So that's why I put the star in there. If you follow the directions and specified host metric with your initials, you'll only see your value. But now I can see how things are behaving. Okay. Okay. Good question. Henry asked, if we didn't create a collector, do we have to put out the initials? You can actually use my initials, JWN. Okay. Use my initials, and that way you'll be able to install this app. But these apps, like I said, will provide us insight as far as the behavior of our systems. How's our disk utilization doing, right? How's our network utilization doing? Of course, how's our CPU utilization doing? So you and I can run these dashboards and see how our systems are behaving. It may take a minute for this to load, sorry. It's being a little slow. But now I can get a sense very quickly of how things are going on. So in lab number 4, we've installed the host metric app. And we can look around and play around. Now, just to be clear, if I go into this host metric app and I want to look at an underlying query, I can click on this icon or this icon for this query or whatever. But I can click on that icon and it's going to show me the underlying query. Now, one thing you might notice when I'm looking at this, right? This interface, this metric query looks different than this metric query. There's a reason. That application was written using our old legacy metric query tool. the one that's very complicated, a lot, hard to use, that sort of thing. You can switch it very easily by going here to the upper right-hand corner where the 3 vertical dots are, and you can switch this to the new metric interface. It won't affect the dashboard at all, but now you'll see it in the structure that we're teaching you. So we really use this new dashboard, this new metric interface. By the way, if you want to switch it back, if you like the old interface, you can go up here again and you can switch it back to classic metrics. So right now we're running both classic, the old user interface, and the new metric interface. I suspect over time, we will deprecate the classic metric interface, but I have no idea when that might happen. And that's what we're trying to show you here in Lab 4. Why things look the way they look. Okay. And also in here, when you create a metric query with this new interface, you can adjust all kinds of neat property settings in here. And you'll see that we'll do that from time to time, see what's going on. So again, back here, back in my new metric interface, it's really got visualizations built right into it. So here I can see my display. Here I can see my axes as far as what I want to put on my axes, kind of style, font properties, things like that. Here's my axes, again, sizes, where do I want to show a left axis? Do I want to show a right axis? Here's my legend. Where do I want my legend to be? Top, bottom, what font size? And then down here is my overall JSON. So everything that we're building here is actually in JSON, and you can copy this JSON out. You can actually modify the JSON yourself. So if you got a color scheme that you want to use, you can actually inject that into this JSON and see what's going on. So what questions have you before we take a break? Any questions? In that case, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a 10-minute break. I'm going to set a 10-minute timer here, and I'll see you guys back when the timer gets down to 0. So take a 10-minute break. I'm going to step away myself. I'll see you back here in about 9 minutes and 52 seconds. Thanks. And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you guys had a chance to get a good break in and take care of things and get yourself your coffee mugs or tea mugs or whatever restocked, refilled up. Are there any questions over everything we've covered so far? And to give you a little harbor tour here of what's going on before we talk about Lab 5 and Lab 6. As you can see, we're kind of knocking out the labs. There is a few more conversations other than these labs, so we're making decent time. So, any questions before we get started? All right. We go ahead and enable some microphones here real quick. There we go. All right. So Lab 5, let's pick up where we left off. What we want to do and what we can do here is we're going to sit there and play with a little bit of information here and look at some things. Again, we're still in basic mode. We haven't changed that. We'll talk about advanced mode in subsequent labs, but let's show you a practical application for this, okay? All right. So what I want to do here in lab number 5 is I'm going to go in here to Sumo. I'm going to go ahead and close up all these tabs. I really don't need them right now. I'm going to close them all up, clean things up a little bit, get rid of my navigation panel. Let's go to new and let's go to metrics. Everything we're going to do here is all about new and metrics. Again, this is my old classic interface. Let me change this back to my new metric interface. There we go. I want to make sure I'm in the new metric interface. And again, I want to make sure I'm in this basic mode. Now, the metric I want to look for here, just so you know, is net. And then net, as I start typing in, I can see I've got net in bytes. And that's what I want to choose. So I want to choose my net in bytes. And rather than seeing all of them, so if I just click away here and run this, it's going to show me all my net in bytes, which is a little much. What I really want to do is I want to add some operators. So here in my operators, what I want to do is I'm going to grab an operator that says I want to see the rate of my net in bytes. And then I want to see, oops, hold on a second. I think I've got that backwards. Yep. Rate. And then I want to see another operator here of my sum. So I want to see the rate, that is to say the change, if you will, of all of them and the sum. And I'm just going to leave the sum open. I'm not going to sum it by collector or something like that, but I'm getting a single value here. And that's really what I want to do here is get a single value. So this gives me an idea of in my network, how my in bytes are doing, how my in bytes are doing. And so I can see on my x-axis here, my time, I can see my values on my y-axis. And then I'm going to add a second query. I'm going to add a second query. This time I'm going to look at my net out bytes. So again, I'll start typing in net. And I'm looking for net out bytes. And again, I'm going to grab the same operator. So I'm going to grab rate. I'm going to grab sum. And so now when I run this, I am seeing two diagrams, right? My net in bytes, my net out bytes. And I can, if I want to, turn some on or turn some off. Now, again, from a practical perspective, this is all fine, well, and good, but maybe I want to see the difference between them. And this is where the power of our metric tool kind of comes and shines real well. So I'm going to add a third query. Now, in this third query, I am not going to use simple metrics and simple operators. I want to be able to write my own expression. And if you ever want to write your own expression, you want to be in advanced mode. So again, back to my documentation. Looking at my exercise here, here's my net in bytes, my net out bytes. Here's my third one. And we want to do this in advanced mode. We want to write our own expression. So here, I can click on these three dots. I want you to click on these three dots. And I'd like you to click to go to advanced mode. Now here, I can write a very sophisticated metric query. But I can also do something like this. This query up here is referred to as hashtag B. This one's hashtag A. And I can do something like this. Hashtag B minus hashtag A. And if I run this, now you'll see that I have 3 different things. Here is my net in bytes. Here is my net out bytes. And then I've got the difference of my net in bytes and out bytes. So what I could do if I want to see the difference here, I could turn off these by clicking on A, clicking on B, so they're invisible. And now I can see the difference of my net in versus my net out. Now you may ask yourself, why? Well, maybe I'm looking for some sort of a network flow pattern here or something like that. But now I can see, or if I want to, I can turn these back on so the people analyzing your network traffic can see the in, see the out, and see the difference between them. Okay. So again, it's a way that you and I can use and reference these 2 other queries. And that's what we're trying to show you here in this lab. Now, that obviously brings up the conversation here about basic query versus advanced query. Whatever mode that you last left it in, I just switched this to advanced. So now if I go up here and grab a new metric query, it's going to show up in advanced mode. Okay. If I change this back to basic mode and I go in and add a new law metric query, it's going to show up in basic mode. Whatever last mode I left it in is the mode that it will show up in. And I can very easily switch it back and forth. And so the advanced mode you're going to find provides some functionality that we just can't do in basic mode. And we'll get into that in the next exercise, next lab. Any questions? Let's move on to the last lab, and then we'll get back to some slides and talk about some things. So let's get into lab 6. So here we want to grab a new metric query, and we want to make sure that we are in advanced mode, because some of the things that we want to do, some of the functions we need to use aren't available in basic mode. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to grab myself a new metric query. If I'm not already in advanced mode, I'm going to go ahead and select advanced mode. And here, what I do is I use my key value pairs to select what I want. And you can see I've got lots of key value pairs here that I can play with. Okay. So in advanced mode, we can use and we can filter things. So for example, we can use a top K or a bottom K. See the top time series, the bottom time series. You can also use the filter statement. You cannot use the filter statement in basic mode. That's why you got to be in advanced mode for it. So I'm going to start off with, and I'm going to go out and grab my CPU sys metric. So I'm going to grab the CPU sys metric. And then I'm going to grab specifically the content type of host metrics. So let's go ahead and build this thing out real quick. We'll start with content type. It doesn't make any difference what order you put things in here. So I'm going to use host metrics. And hang on a second. Oops. Okay. Hold on a minute. There we go. Sorry. I want to use underscore content type equals underscore content type. Then I can use host metrics. And again, if I run this by itself, I'm seeing lots and lots of metrics, lots and lots of data, lots and lots of stuff. Okay. What I want to do, of course, is I could filter it onto my machine if I want to. I could go in there, and then I'm seeing lots and lots of different metrics. So what I want to do is I want to filter for a specific metric. So I'm going to say source category equals host metric with my initials. So here we go. Source category equals host metric JWM. And then I can specify that the metric that I want is equal to metric is equal to CPU sys. CPU sys, and I can run that out. So now what I'm doing here in advanced metric query is I am looking at my CPU system. And you can see my CPU system varies between a little less than 2% and maybe 5% at most. Now, the reason we're doing this and the reason we're in advanced mode is we want to use some advanced querying. We want to use this filter command. And so I'm going to take this code right here that says pipe filter minimum is greater than 0 and maximum is greater than 10. Let me copy that and paste that. So again, it's got a pipe indicating a new command. And I'm going to filter out anything I want to filter. And I only want to see things between 0 and 10. And of course, I'm seeing my data, right? I got rid of my 0 down below here, and I got nothing above 10. If I decide to move this, maybe I move this to, gee, I want to go greater than 2, and I rerun this, I get no data because on my chart, there I had a value of 2. Okay. We do this neat. Now, again, just for fun here, let me go ahead and change some things here real quick, just so you can get a sense for maybe the value of this. When I remove and see all my host metrics, that is to say my machine and a couple of other machines, right? Here's your machines and stuff like that. Again, what I'm looking at here is any value that's between 0 and 10. Notice somebody here has a spike. SH has a spike that goes up to about 9%. If I change this, we'll make it 8. Could make it 9, I don't care. It gets rid of SH's line completely. So I can use my filter to filter within a specific range that I'm looking for. So again, I got rid of SH's line, but I kept the other lines that are well below. So you can use the filter to filter out what you may or may not want to see, specific outliers, specific things, that sort of thing. That's the filter command. Okay. Again, I can also use something like a filter of average greater than a specific 95%. So again, if I'm looking to see if any of my CPUs are running hot, I probably want to do something filter average of greater than 90% or whatever to see which machines are running high. Okay. So it's an example of doing stuff like that. Any questions about this so far? Any questions or problems writing metric queries?
Is this real time, or what is the delay between this data?
It is real time. Obviously, this is older data, but this will automatically refresh itself. When I actually add it to a dashboard, I can tell to automatically refresh every 30 seconds or 2 minutes or whatever. So yes, it can and typically is real time. Whenever I run this is real time. Here's my current time right here.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, good question. Any other questions? Let's get back to our slides. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I tried this filter average greater than 95, but I'm not receiving any results.
Okay, I'm sorry, you were trying to do what?
I tried filter average greater than 100,
Okay.
but I'm not receiving any results.
Okay. But is it running or did it run or?
It ran, but it did not return any results.
Okay, it won't because you don't have anything that has an average greater than 95%.
Okay, I tried. Okay. Okay,
Yeah, which is why I didn't demonstrate this, because this is not a good exercise for the data that we have.
Okay, I tried filter average less than 100, then it showed. I can able to see the results. Thanks.
Okay, so you did less than 100?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm able to see the results.
Okay, all right, good. All right. So back to my slides here for a second. So that's, your typical use case. You're creating metrics, you're looking at metrics, you're ingesting the metrics, you're seeing what's going on. That's great. For those of you on AWS or Azure or Google Cloud Platform for that matter, you probably have a strong desire to see how your system performance is doing. And if you're on Azure, I'm not sure why this is taking so long to load, but if you're on Azure, you would use probably your network monitor and your network monitor values. If you're on AWS, you're going to probably use CloudWatch metrics. And there is a great test question or two from this document. So if you don't mind, I'm going to stop my slides for just a second here. And I'm going to go out to this lovely document. And this is an AWS document. This is not a Sumo Logic document. And you're going to get a test question about, when I use AWS CloudTrail, the maximum number of whatever's I can use. And so if you go out here and you find, CloudWatch, how many metric streams can I have? So you're going to use this link to take you out to this link, and that's where you'll find your answer. As I said, there are some questions in this exam that are very tough that are going to send you on a chase for information. So I'm going to put this link into the chat box so you guys can have it. So like I said, if you want to know about metric streams in your CloudWatch environment, it talks about maybe some parameters that you can use, some metrics, some information, all of that fun stuff. Here's where you can find out more about Amazon CloudWatch and or Amazon other things as far as metric information. Obviously, you can also do the same thing with Azure and Network Monitor, and what you can grab off the Network Monitor. There is documentation there as well. So we recommend that you take advantage of that link and look at the AWS docs and see what's going on. Now, what we can do is we can actually see AWS metrics that we collect via CloudWatch. And we've got a bunch of apps that you and I can install here to see things via CloudWatch. There are some suggestions here with regards to AWS metrics, right? If you want to grab EC2 data, right, you can save money by using an installed collector instead of using your hosted collector, because you'll be able to grab more data that way. Choose the right scan intervals, right? If AWS reports CloudWatch metrics in 1 minute, 3 minute, and 5 minutes. So setting a scan interval too short could lead to excessive querying. Too long can delay a update frequency. This point right here, you will see, is a question on the certification exam, which is why I pointed out. So as you go in here and you install certain apps like AWS CloudTrail, AWS CloudWatch for your metrics, you can take advantage and do that. So what they want us to do is they want us to go ahead and query our AWS ALB metrics. We want to install a metric app and reverse engineer those. So here in our labs, moving on to lab number 7, they want us to monitor and look at our AWS load balancing. So I'm going to go out here and I'm going to grab this source category. Again, in your company, if you're running AWS, you may have called your source category for your AWS metrics something else. But let me go ahead and close this up, grab a new one. Now this is in advanced mode. So in advanced mode, this starts to look like a log query, if you will. Source category equals, right? Whatever I want. And so here I can run this information and it didn't produce any results. Why? I'm going to get rid of the double quotes. I don't need the double quotes. There is no.
You're just doing a regular search, actually.
I'm sorry. Oh, that's right. I did do a regular search. Shame on me. I'm here in a football scholarship. There we go. Metric search. There we go. Thank you. Apologies. Make sure you're in advanced mode. There we go. Sorry, I've had too much of the log queries today. So here I'm looking at all of my metrics on my AWS environment. And so I can see all my different load balancers, all my different environments, all my different metrics, all kinds of fun stuff here from my AWS environment. Okay. By the way, for more information about your CloudWatch, if I click on this link, again, that link provides me that link that I copied up earlier, where you can look up, CloudWatch metrics and all that fun stuff. And like I said, there'll be a test question or two that you'll get to answer from that documentation. Now, what I want to do is I want to add and specifically look for a specific metric. The metric is HTTP code ELB 5XX, 501, 502, 503, I don't care. So if I copy this particular code, and if I paste it into my query, or of course I could type it in itself. Of course, it helps if I put a space in there. There we go. So metric equals HTTP 500 code. And now I run this. Now I'm looking at just my 500XX codes. And I see I've got a couple here that are running a little high. The rest of them are running fairly low. So again, these are 5XX errors. I shouldn't be getting any of these, to be honest with you. So the ones that are running high, I probably want to investigate. I can also, if I want to, specify an average. So again, when I want to add an operator in here in the advanced query, I type in a pipe, and I type in my operator average. So now I'm looking at the average of my 5XX errors. Now, I can also, if I want to, here add another query. Take this exact query right here, duplicate it. Only I'm going to add a pipe, and I want to do a time shift. Now, you may recall yesterday when we used the time shift operator, right? We said, 1M, 2H, whatever. I'm sorry, with the time slice operator. We use that. But here, if I want to go back a day, I don't type in -1 day. I type in 1D. So if I want to go back, I want to compare today's performance against yesterday's performance. Now I see today's performance. Now I see yesterday's performance. And again, if I wanted to, I could even add the usual #B minus #A and see the differences of what's going on. And I can turn those off to see my delta, to see my difference. So you can use with AWS, with Azure, with whatever, all these operators to basically see how your metric information is behaving. Okay. And that's what we're just trying to show you here. You can create these types of queries. Now, what we can also do is we've got built-in dashboards, built-in applications that you can install that provide you the same information. So if I wanted to, I can go out here to our app catalog. And in our app catalog, if I want to focus on AWS, let me get rid of that host. You'll see here's my Elastic Load Balancer. Here's my Elastic Load Balancer in metrics. And I can install this app if I want to see how things are running. Again, these already have the queries and stuff built into them. In fact, if you'll notice, I already have them installed. Okay, my application load balancer, my classic load balancer. And if I look here, I'm looking for my overview. There we go. My classic load balancer. Hold on, let's go to my application load balancer. Let's try that again. Okay, good. I'll make sure I'm getting some data. So again, these queries are already written for you. These metric queries are already written, and you can take advantage of these in this built-in dashboard. Curious to see if, okay, there's no data in here. I've got to figure out what changed in my training environment. Okay, yeah, I'll have to look into that. But you can install these apps that have queries and stuff built in them to see basically what's going on. And then in these apps, you can also filter for what availability zone you want. So let me just show you that real quick. Something we really didn't talk about in the other classes. So let me go back in here. There's a filter funnel up here, and I can click on that filter funnel if I want to, and I can specify a specific source category, maybe my CloudTrail metrics, and it's going to filter all of my panels to show me that information. So hang on a second, let's look like CloudTrail. Let's grab the ALB, it should have some data there. Come on. Tell you what, let me cheat here for a second. Just trying to see if I got some specific data points here I can use. Okay, I can specify by collector ID, by source. I can also put a filter up here for region, right? Or of course I can select and use the panel selectors here. There's only 2 regions here, US East 1 and US East 2. But I can add that as a filter here if I want to. So bottom line, with these built-in dashboards, they also have filters that you can use to make things a little easier for you to see. Let me grab the stage accounts. I think the stage accounts are working. Then again, maybe not. Okay, fair enough. Somebody's been tinkering with our training department. All right, and that's what we're just trying to show you what you can see. And then, as I said, you can look at the underlying queries. So let me get rid of this. You can go into these, the underlying queries that make these up, right here. And again, you can see this is in classic metrics. I can change it to the new metrics. And again, I can modify this query and change it. And then I can go back and update back to the dashboard. That's some stuff we're trying to show you. All right. Now, up till now, I mentioned to you that we use key value pairs, and that's true. We do use key value pairs, but not all metrics are generated with key value pairs. Metrics come in different formats, in different structures, in different types. And so we're going to talk about how we can convert the different metric formats. So metric formats, like I said, we like key value pair. That's typically what we use. Bear with me a second while this loads. Again, those key value pairs, we tend to like that. But the only one that does key value pairs is Carbon 2.0. So when metrics are generated by systems, they're generated in different formats. One is Carbon 2.0, which we natively like. The other is Prometheus. And what Prometheus will do is take the name of the object and then inside here, put the cluster node structure values inside brackets. And then here's your metric value and your timestamp. Okay. So it uses this sort of notation. And then there's another notation, a dotted notation called graphite. So we support metric formats in Carbon 2.0, Prometheus, and graphite. The question is, how do we convert that? How do we make and convert one to the other? Well, number one, in our tool, you can actually use and write and reference them by their native structure. You can use them by their native structure. So if you know what the dotted notation is, you can use that and it works fine. Or you can use the Prometheus notation and it works fine if those are its native. But you can, I can, we can create a metric rule. And in that metric rule, we'll convert it to Carbon 2.0, convert it to those key value pairs. Where is the metric rule editor? If I go into Sumo Logic, if I go in here to manage data, if I go into metrics, here's where my metric rules are. And for example, we used to have an environment where we used to have in graphite travel dot namespace dot node dot prod dot type and dot metric. It was all in dotted notation. what we could do is create a rule that says, look, when you come across the word travel, the first field after that, you're going to extract out as metric right here. And so you're going to say namespace equals, then whatever that value is. Then when you get to the next field, which is node, you're going to say node equals whatever that value is. So we're converting from graphite format to Carbon 2.0 to make it easy. And we could use either one of those notations in our metric query. So we support Prometheus, Carbon 2.0, and graphite. Those are the formats we support. Okay. Thank you, Cheaton. I'm not hearing that background noise, but I'll do a quick check here of mics and make sure we're in good shape. I think we're okay though. Okay. So thanks for pointing that out, Cheaton. All right. So back to my slides here for a second. We can use the metric rules editor and we can convert from one metric type to another. Want to make sure you're aware of that. Now, while we're here, let's also talk about some of the other options. So again, under manage data, under metrics, we have metric rules. And that's what I just talked about. How you and I can create a rule to convert from one format to another format. We also have something called logs to metrics. Logs to metrics. And what we can do is when we parse out logs, we can find metrics inside of those logs. So if we can counter some logs, we can parse out the metrics from those logs. Remember our good old Apache logs that we played with the last couple of days, our Apache access logs? Remember how they had a status code, they had a size? Well, you and I could write a query to extract out that size. In fact, if I go in here to lab 8, getting metrics from logs, I can take and I can create a new logs to metrics. I'll give it a name. Put my initials in here. Apache logs. We'll call it logs with a real S there. There we go. Okay. Scope. Here's where I specify what my source category or my data is. And then my parse expression. You may or may not believe it, but you've seen this parse expression before. This is a parse regex where we're going to extract out some fields. So I'm going to simply take that parse expression. This is a log parsing expression right here. And when I scroll down, I now see what this is going to start to look like. It's parsed out my method. It's parsed out my refer, my size, my source IP, my status code, et cetera, et cetera. Now it's interesting. When we look at these fields, obviously the ones that are text-based are obviously not a metric, right? Get the URL, those aren't metrics. Those are obviously fields that we're going to use in our field browser or whatever. Now this IP address, it's got periods in it, therefore it is also not a metric. So it's not a metric. So there's two numbers here that I have. One is called size. Let me go back up here. Size, which is numeric, and status code, which is also purely numeric. So what I'm going to do down here at the bottom is I am going to specify, in the case of my size, I want it treated as a metric. I want it aggregated, sum, min, max. I want it to be a metric. In the case of status code, that is not something that I want to add. I don't want to add all my 200s together. I don't want to add my 304s together. So I'm going to treat that as a dimension or as a non-metric because it's going to use to qualify things. So for example, if I want to aggregate and see the sum of my size based on my status code, it will then show me 200, then my average or total size, and my 304 is my total size. So you're defining whether or not the numeric values should be treated as metrics or treated as dimensions or non-metrics. Now, one other thing that's kind of cool about this, by the way, is that when you purchased Sumo Logic, your company gets charged by what you ingest based on your data tiers and all that, okay? But whatever you purchase, you get so many what we call data points per minute, DPMs. Your DPMs are your metrics. You get so many metrics free. Many of our customers underutilize their metrics. They do. So as you go in and do logs to metrics, you can click on this estimate DPMs, and it will show you, number one, how many DPMs you've purchased. And it will then show you what the, how many DPMs this is going to generate. And also show how many you've got available. Okay. So you can see, am I going over budget? Am I close to budget? I would venture to say most of you are probably not using your metrics for what you're paying for. Okay. Just want you to be aware of. Okay. Okay. Jason asked a really good question. For logs that are coming in JSON already, do we need to write the expression? Yes, you do. Because the purpose of this Jason, purpose of this, Jason, is that we want to tell it from the logs what are metrics. So that's what this is all about. So yes, I still have to, parse out the fields here that I want, even if I'm, we do it automatically. I need to parse out what the fields are that I want, specifically the metric fields, and I need to designate them as metric fields. So I hope that answers your question. Good question. All right. So we can then add this, save this, and it will now, as we ingest those logs, it will now give us the status code and our size, and we'll be able to write queries against this. And that's basically what good old Lab 8 is doing. Now, I'm not going to save this. I close that up. I'm not going to save it because I really don't need another logs to metrics here. I've got lots of logs to metrics here. And so I don't need to, a lot of people have created these. We need to clean these up and get rid of these. Okay. One other thing, I also have metric transformational rules where I can take a metric if I want to, and I can automatically apply some sort of math to it. Maybe I want to calculate my sales tax. Maybe I want to calculate my shipping costs, something like that. I can create metric transformational rules to calculate certain values and create a new metric that talks about my shipping cost or my sales tax or whatever. One other thing I want to mention in here, actually, we're going to get into it in lab number 9. But in lab number 9, monitoring your metrics, okay? Lab number 9, monitoring our metrics. We have a new capability in our product. When I say new, it's been about 6 months, 9 months old, where we can create metric monitors. You can also use it for log monitoring as well. But under manage data, there is this section called monitoring. And you and I can create a monitor. Now, before we create a monitor, I can actually put a folder and organize my monitors in these folders if I want to. So if I want to take all my AWS environments and put them in a folder and put my monitors for those in there, I can. If I don't specify a folder, it's going to put it in this high level. And then here I can specify what kind of monitor do I want. Do I want logs or do I want metrics? Again, this is in basic mode. I can change it to advanced mode if I need to, but let's go ahead and play along here for a second. I'm going to grab my CPU sys, and I can specify my source category equals my host, and it will then show me my CPU sys. There it is down there. Okay. Again, I haven't been capturing this. This is 3 days. Let me go back to something a little simpler, like 15 minutes. There we go. And I see that my CPU system level is running anywhere from 1.5 to 4, which makes sense, right? I'm a client computer. I'm not running a server. I'm not running a bunch of heavy things. I'm not a database server or something like that, but I can monitor any device that I want, any system that I want. I can create an alert for that. Now, by the way, I can do this based on metrics. I can also do it using outlier functions if I want to. Good old outlier methods and outlier functionality. But what I want to do is if I'm missing some data, if this system goes down for a period of time, notify me. And when it comes back, notify me again. Let me know it's back. I can also set warning levels. Now, in reality, I probably want to set warning levels at 80% or something fairly high. For this example right here, I'm going to arbitrarily set my warning level just so you can see it so it makes sense to a value of 3%. So anything below 3% is normal. If it gets above 3%, I'm going to set a warning level. And again, I can tell it to notify me when it recovers and gets below that again. And then I can specify critical levels. And again, critical levels might be 90, 95%. In this case, maybe what I want is maybe 4%. I don't know, something, when I get above that high, I want to be notified. So you define your trigger mechanisms, your trigger thresholds. And by default, if whatever your alert is set for, your warning, your critical alert, the recovery is the same value, unless you throw this switch. Then you can make the value different for your recovery than your alert. Then we specify this information, and then down here, how do you want to notify folks? Do you want to send an email? Do you want to send something through Datadog? Do you want to send something through Slack? Do you want to send something through Teams? Do you want to set something, create a webhook and use that webhook to talk to PagerDuty or whatever? So how do you want to notify? Just for fun here, to keep it simple, I'll create a new email. Who do I want to send this to? Again, I could send this to my ops center if I want, right? Work ops at whatever. I can specify who I want to send it to. I can send it to more than one. Cheating, is there a question, sir?
Yeah, is it possible to schedule a phone call or SMS?
Can I schedule it? Is that your question?
Yeah, a phone call or SMS in case of as a notification instead of
Okay.
email.
I mean, to answer your question, you create a webhook into SMS if you want. So one of the things you can do is create a webhook into SMS. But if you want to set an alert based on your alerts, if your alerts are failing, if Sumo Logic goes down, then you would do that with another system. So I'm not sure I understand your question.
So I want to receive a phone call in case, if I am triggering a critical alert.
Okay. So yeah, I'm sorry. So what you can do is in this area here called webhooks, you would create a webhook, and I'll show you where that webhook gets created. So it goes out to PagerDuty or sends an SMS message. Okay.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
that hopefully that answers your question. Let me finish this up and I'll show you where the webhooks are. Okay. In here in the subject line, you can put all kinds of static text, dynamic text. Here's the dynamic text that values fields that you can use. You can type in whatever you want in your message if you need to. And then here's where you define whether you want to be fired off for missing data and recovery, warnings, alerts, so forth and so on. You can add additional notifications. So I can send out emails. I can send out, SMS short messages. I can do all kinds of stuff. And then of course I give this thing a name and I save it. Okay. What's funny to me is I'm used to user interfaces where it drives you down the page to fill it out. And then the save button is at the bottom. So after you've completed everything out, but the save button is up here at the top. So I find that interesting. Now, let me answer Cheatham's question regarding where webhooks and stuff are. So here under collection, oops, I'm sorry, no. Under monitoring, there we go, back to monitoring. Here under my connections is where I can set up my webhooks. So up here, I can click on this plus sign and I can send something to PagerDuty, or I can send something to ServiceNow. As far as an SMS, since SMS is not listed here, I could go in here to webhook and I could define, what I want to do. And in the case of URL, it's SMS and the phone number. And then what payload and or information here do I need? What stuff do I want to send you? So, Cheatham, does that answer your question, sir?
Yeah, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for asking. So we wanted to show that you have this capability to send these type of messages. Are there any questions that you all have with regards to sending up these alerts and that sort of thing? I've got one more thing here to talk about. Let me close those tabs up. And that is the last lab in this lab set is a cleanup lab, because some of you have installed a collector on your computer. And I don't think you want to keep sending us data. You can, doesn't break my heart, but I assume that you probably want to remove your collector. So there's two parts to this, two parts to removing the collector. One, you're going to go into Sumo Logic, the training environment here, excuse me. You're going to go into collection. You're going to find your collector. You can search for it, right, by your host name or whatever. And then over here, you click delete, and that will remove your collector. Now, there's still that software, though, that's installed on your computer. We won't be receiving any data once you delete this, but that you've got an application installed on your computer that you ought to get rid of. So if you're running Windows, you would go into your Windows control panel, add remove programs, and you would uninstall that program, the Sumo Logic Collector program. You would uninstall it. If you're on a Mac, you actually have to go into your Finder. So let me show you the trusty disty finder here. Bear with me a second. So I'm on a Mac, so let me go ahead and trusty disty finder this. Okay, open new window. And under applications, which is where all your applications get installed, here under, there's a folder called Sumo Logic Collector. And in this Sumo Logic Collector, here is the uninstaller app. You run that and it will remove your software for you. That's that. So I do want to make sure that if you did install a collector, and if you want to remove it, I certainly understand that. I wanted to make sure that you are aware of how to, so that, you know, saves you sending data to Sumo Logic all the time. So that's the last lab. Uninstalling this, deleting your collector, going on. And that pretty much takes care of the class, the course. Do you have any questions before we turn you on to the exam? Cheaton, go ahead, sir. You don't have to raise your hand, by the way, just ask your question.
Sure. So I have a couple of EC2 instances running on AWS, and I have also configured a load balancer along with auto scaling group.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the different ways in which I can send the data to Sumo Logic? One is, I understand that one is the collector mechanism where I can install the collector on the EC2 instances, and that will start sending the data.
Yep.
But is there an automatic way where I could just configure few services and it will start collecting the data from AWS?
Because AWS has a hosted collector, you're still going to have to go in there and configure your hosted collector, but it's really nothing to configure. Okay, Henry, I'll get your question in just a second. There's really nothing that you have to configure in there to start ingesting that data, but you do have to define your sources. So let me answer your question specifically, excuse me. So again, back to collections. This time I am going to add a collector. This time it's a hosted collector. And the hosted collector is just a placeholder. So just bear with me a second. Let me type something in here to appease the whatevers. And then here you need to, for your hosted collector, here's where you specify your sources. And if you want your AWS EC2 data, you want your CrowdStrike data, whatever the heck you want, or maybe you want to grab it through your HTTP logs and metrics, whatever you want, you would go in here and define that. And that's, oh, I'm sorry, here's the AWS stuff. You would go in here and select whatever it is that you want to bring in. And here is where we need specifics, what the bucket name is in this case, what the path expression is, so we can get the right data. So those do need to be set up. But I think it's a fairly simple setup. And then we'll start bringing those in and you can start collecting that data. Does that answer your question, Sheena?
Yes. So if I am using AWS S3, EFS, CloudWatch, all of those data I need to configure, like I need to configure the data collectors for each one of them. And then
The answer to your question is yes. However, usually if you grab your CloudWatch metrics, that's going to grab a bulk of it. That's going to grab probably 80 to 90% of it.
Okay.
So, but I would want to make sure I've got all of the stuff that I want to collect in here.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. Now, somebody asked about the slides and making sure the slides are available to you, because obviously you're going to take the exam, and I get that. So bear with me a second while I take care of that little problem. It is not going to be fancy, but it is going to functionally work. So bear with me a moment. Let me make a PDF document here of the slides, and I will upload that into the chat box to make it easy for you and for I to get that information. So bear with me while it's generating that PDF. And then I will upload this PDF into the chat box. And so you guys will have a copy of these slides. I apologize that they're not there where we normally have those things. This is one of the last classes they were working on, and we didn't get a chance to get it posted for today's class. So I'll have those up to you for a minute. So thanks, Henry, for asking. And thanks, Mark. Okay. Still waiting for the PDF to be generated here. While I'm waiting for that PDF to be generated, again, you all know, hopefully, to go into Sumo Logic, into the training environment, open up this navigation panel, and you can sign out. You can log out of here. And when you take your exam, you want to log in from your company's Sumo Logic training environment. So you're going to go to your company's environment. You're going to log in so that you, with your name, get credit for this exam. Okay. And then once you log in in your environment, of course, you're going to go in here to the Home tab, Certification, Get Certified. And here under Get Certified, you're going to find the Metric Mastery exam. And you can click on this registration button and it registers it real quick. Pretty instantaneous. And then before you start, of course, it's going to tell you got 30 questions, 60 minutes complete, passing score 75, yada, 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 yada. Open book, open note exam. When you click next, here's where it shows you the exam. Here's our 60-minute counter. As I scroll down and start seeing the question, my counter starts up. Okay. And then, of course, it starts off with my questions. Based on the Lab 7 exercise, which query will display the count of server errors on the day before today? When my time shift operator, I don't use the minus sign. So this is the one that I want. Okay. That was from Lab 7. Then I go down to the next one here. What's important to choose the right intervals when adjusting CloudWatch metrics? Remember, talked about it setting too long and too short from that slide. Which, by the way, I'm going to upload the slides here in just a second. Okay. Here we go. So let's see. Setting the interval too short can lead to excessive querying. Okay. And then setting the interval too long can delay the update frequency. Okay, so bottom line is if I answer a couple of questions here, I then submit my answers. It tells me what I got right. It tells me what I got wrong. And I can click close course to have it upload to my profile. And like I said, if you pass, life is good. Have yourselves a wonderful time. I am going to upload the PDF. So I'm going to put that in the chat box right now, the PDF of the slides. So just bear with me a moment. Again, I will be here in case you have any questions. So feel free to take the exam. If you need to sign out and do other things, that's fine. It's entirely up to you, but I'll be here to answer your questions. Thanks a lot for attending. Good luck. Again, we got classes going on next week as well. Going to continue on with some other stuff. So if you want to join us, we look forward to seeing you. Otherwise, please be safe. Please be well. Thanks a lot for attending. We'll talk to you guys later. So if you want to sign out and do this exam later, you can. If you want to do it right now, certainly I'll be here to help you out. Thanks again. Have a wonderful day. You stop the recording.